Well, hello, everyone. I might say good morning or good afternoon, depending where you are listening to us from. Welcome to the third day in the Newfoundland.Gold Virtual Investor Days series. I'm so glad that you could join us. And I'm very excited to be hosting today's panel discussion and then introducing a keynote speaker that I know we are all here on the panel interested to hear from. So without further ado, let's kick off. I am joined today by the president, CEOs, leaders of 4 different Newfoundland.Gold explorers. I'm going to start by giving each of them just 3 minutes, very short time frame, to introduce themselves and their company, and obviously very brief, so that we can set the stage. And then I have a bunch of questions that I'm going to ask them, mostly around sort of geology and how this incredible Newfoundland area play is developing. So let me start with the company that put out some news that caught a little bit of attention this morning. That would be Labrador Gold, and Roger Moss is here to give us a brief introduction to that story.
Yeah, thanks, Gwen, and thanks everybody for attending, and for the Newfoundland.Gold Alliance for putting this all together. Yeah, I'm an exploration geologist. I've had something like 30 years of experience in mineral exploration, mostly copper and gold, and all over the world, a lot of it in Canada. And Labrador Gold really came together about 3 years ago when we optioned some shares from, optioned the property from Sean Ryan. And Sean and I have been working together ever since. We optioned the Kingsway project from him last year. And that was an interesting story. It was right after the discovery announced by Newfoundland.Gold Corp, and it was really well, we all know what happened with that intersection, and I said about trying to find something nearby, and Sean happened to mention that he had these claims right next to them, so we got into a bit of a bidding war for them. We won it, and then we did a lot of exploration last year. We hit the ground running after getting through all the COVID regulations. And we spent about 4 months on the ground, and ended up with a discovery of visible gold in a quartz vein boulder right next to a quartz vein outcrop, which we now call Big Vein. And yeah, the results that we put out this morning from the drilling that we've been doing on that Big Vein, and it's taken a little time to find the high grade, but I think we're onto it now, and it'll be interesting to see what comes next.
Exciting. Yeah, no pressure. There was only a whole market of excitement waiting for you to release the kind of numbers that you did this morning. But thankfully, for everyone, you did. And we'll move on from here. All right. The second company that I would love to introduce is Sassy Resources. Now, I don't know really if I should introduce Sassy or Gander. I will let Mark Scott explain the setup there.
Thanks, Gwen. Great to be with you. My name is Mark Scott. I'm the president and CEO of Sassy Resources, which is a pretty young, up-and-coming and fast-growing company. We first listed on the CSE last August under the symbol SASY, and we're also listed in the States on OTCQB under the symbol SSYRF, and in Germany, in Frankfurt and Stuttgart, and on TradeGate under 4E7 is our symbol. We started off Sassy last year with our flagship Formore project in the SK Camp of the Golden Triangle, where we had some very early success in our first field season on the Formore project with the Westmore Discovery Zone, which is an intrusive orogenic gold discovery that we look forward to getting back to and having another field season exploring this coming summer, along with about a dozen other prospects on that property. But the thing about having a great property in the SK Camp of the Golden Triangle is that you get a pretty short field season to work with. And so we spent the winter looking for year-round project opportunities and started working with Vulcan Minerals in the fall of last year and through the winter to first option a number of properties from Vulcan Minerals, and then started working with Sean Ryan and his team in December of last year. And we've since executed 3 option agreements with Sean to establish actually the largest claim position in Newfoundland with 9,032 claims and some 2,257 square kilometers of ground under option. And we're happy to be here today with some of our neighbors, Lab and Exploits, and the sort of senior members of the Newfoundland Gold Rush Marathon, and more so NFG with every news release are creating quite a buzz, and we're happy to be here to talk about the great infrastructure and the highly prospective ground that there is really across a very wide swath of the now much more well-known central Newfoundland gold belt.
I will definitely be diving into some of the things that you just mentioned, some of the high bars that have been set, and a bunch of the scale of this opportunity, the excitement. So thanks for prefacing all that stuff. Let's move on to our third company, that is Sky Gold. And I would love to ask Aaron McBriarty to run us through that story in 3 minutes.
All right. Well, my name is Aaron McBriarty. I'm a geologist with Sky Gold Incorporated. We have property in between Newfoundland.Gold and Exploits. North to south, it's about 4 or 5, maybe 6 kilometers. We have drill results that show a 35 meter section of 0.77 grams per ton, up to 7.7 grams per ton in some areas. It's a marine sediment classic or marine sediment hosted gold deposit, epithermal, I believe. But there's some epizonal things that might be consolidated with the Fosterville mine camp in Australia that a fellow was talking about the other day on a top of the gate. But I'm looking forward to talking with these three guys and discussing the further development of the Queensway deposit types.
Fantastic. And last but certainly not least, we have Exploits Gold and Mike Collins to introduce that story.
Thanks, Gwen. Great to be here today. Exploits Gold is a publicly traded CSE company. Tickers NFLD, trades on the OTC NFLDF, and as well on the Frankfurt trade gate and all the European markets, the German markets. Exploits really came to be out of discussions following the fabulous initial results out of Newfoundland.Gold back in December 2019. Sitting down with Nick Rodway, Gary Lewis, a local prospector as well. We kind of looked at what we felt that was a sea of change, the intersection, but more importantly, the model that they were using for their exploration, and decided that it was a place we had to be in. And because both Nick and Gary have worked for years and years in that camp, they knew the ground, were able to put together very significant packages at Mount Peyton and at Jonathan's Pond as a cornerstone. And then we managed to pull some additional ground in around those through competitive staking. And that was really where we started. And then we thought about what this model was, and we realized that, the structures that we're looking at, and they're looking at the Keats Zone, Newfoundland's Keats Zone, they go from all the way from Hale in North Carolina, which is a 6 million ounce deposit, all the way over to Dalradian in Ireland, which is also 6 million ounces indicated and inferred, I should say. And so the potential really wasn't a closology. It was structure, rock type, and the amount of deformation that you were seeing around those structures, the secondary and tertiary targets. So we stepped back and we looked at the exploit subzone on an island basis, and through that we came up with building a land package through additional joint ventures and purchase agreements with local prospectors, as well as pure staking plays. Managed to put together a very large scale land package that has 200 kilometers of these deep-seated structures. And that's really where we land today with, I think, 5 different targets that are permitted for drilling this summer. That's over 70 drill holes permitted on these 5 different targets, and a number of different targets that we're currently bringing forward to put permits on as well. And one of the key things that we're working on is working with Goldspot to look at the land package as a whole. We've just finished, I think, our VTEM surveys there. There's a bit more work around that to get the data. But once we have that, we've got our compilation. We'll look at doing AI interrogation of that data set to review the targets that we've chosen and where we are within them, but also looking at the package as a whole and seeing what else we're missing. Because it's so large, you just can't go over it, one person looking at, the lines of geophysics in each prospect. So we need to have that technology to advance it. And that's kind of where we're at, and that's busy summer. Looking forward to it, and really excited today to see Roger Moss's press release and expanding the potential of the Appleton to the north and demonstrating that it's not just a really tight focus on the Keats Zone, but this is a regional thing, and this is exciting, I think, for all of us.
Well, that's a good segue into the first sort of area of questions that I wanted to explore, which is just how this evolved. I mean, Newfoundland has obviously been sitting there for a long time and hadn't got very much attention from gold explorers. And, there's been scattered small scale gold things there for years, but it wasn't until, Roger and 3 years ago and Newfound.Gold in about the same time frame, and Sean Ryan, that this attention really started to shift. So Roger, why don't I start with you with this question? What changed? What was it that changed in the approach to Newfoundland and the understanding of the geology, sort of maybe a little bit big picture wise, that started this all off?
Well, I don't think I can speak for Newfound or Sean. I know what Sean was doing. As far as I'm aware, they were both staking at around the same time in 2016. And I think the first round of gold, or the first serious round of gold exploration, was done in the mid 80s, early 90s by Noranda. And a lot of the showings that are now on the Queensway project were discovered during that time. We've all seen the videos by the Keats family and father and son, incredible stories. So I think after that first round, there was basically nothing much happened. There was still a sporadic exploration over the next, say, 10, 20 years. And then I think what happened was that Sean had decided that Newfoundland was the place to go. He'd done everything that he wanted to do over in the Yukon. He came over here and he staked a whole bunch of claims, and he optioned them to a company called Torque Resources. And Torque Resources went through there on a much larger claim block than Sean has now with us and with C2C, and just did a lot of geochemistry. And that started popping up targets. Now, for some reason, Torque decided that wasn't enough for them, and they dropped the property, which was our good luck. And I think it was really like Newfound.Gold had also been exploring for the same period of time, in that 3-year period. And but it wasn't really until that intersection announced last January that everybody sort of stood up and took attention, paid attention, myself included. I think that was just the turning point for the entire central Newfoundland. I mean, if you look at Marathon Gold, had been plugging away down there for years. Sockman had also been drilling, and but nobody was paying attention to those. I think 2 years ago you could have bought Marathon Gold for like $1 or less. I don't know where it's at now, but and they have something like 4 million ounces in resource and a positive feasibility study. So, that didn't do it. So it was really just that one intersection that just lit everything up in central Newfoundland.
It's funny how these things work, right? Like you say, Marathon was well underway to defining a large, and we now know very economic resource, but it took this high grade hit. And so it's strange how, the market's preferences for high grade, which has been very apparent for the last few years, just sort of whatever the market's preferring lines up with what gets discovered, and all of a sudden an opportunity blossoms. Mark, I know you at Gander have been really adding to your land position. I mean, you all have to some extent. Do you want to talk about how that has played out? Like, sort of how the ground has been staked or transacted, what's still available, is it all gone, how quickly people have moved in? You want to paint a little bit of the picture there?
Sure. We started, like I said before, with Vulcan Minerals and some smaller land packages late last year and into the first part of this year. And when we got to talking with Sean Ryan and hearing his sort of unifying theory of Newfoundland geology and look more into the work that NFG and Lab and others have been doing, we started to see these properties that had the right kind of structures that we were looking for, the right kind of rocks that we were looking for, and started off with an initial set of properties that we were going to option from Sean. And then the more we got into looking at them, the more we felt compelled to expand those to the size that they've become today. So we didn't start out intending to acquire almost 2,300 square kilometers of ground on the island of Newfoundland, but that's how it's played out as we've gotten more into the details of looking at, for example, the Mount Peyton property, which sits next to Michael's ground along the Mount Peyton linear, I think they refer to it as, and right in between, it's an 876 square kilometer block of claims directly between the Keat Zone and that Mount Peyton linear and the Slocum and Moosehead development on the other side of us, with some really interesting structures, the predominant north, southwest and northeast structures, but a large nose fold in there, and an east-west structure that's pretty interesting, that appears to run right between Keats and Moosehead, all of which have historic gold anomalies sitting right on top of those structures that we've identified in the regional mag surveys that the Newfoundland Geological Service has been able to provide. So, there's been a bit of an evolution over the last 6 or 7 months to our position in Newfoundland, and we really like the ground we've picked up. It's the old adage, good rocks, good neighbors, good jurisdiction, go for it. So that's where we are. As for whether the ground is all taken up, the good ground is all taken up, I wouldn't want to speak for anybody else or diminish anybody else's odds of finding success on the island. The structural and geological conditions that have been described by other presenters over the course of this 3-day event certainly paint a picture as to how that table has been set for there to be any number of potentially economic gold and base metal deposits on the island, which has a long history of mining, even if the emergence of the very high grade gold that we're seeing in the last little while is fairly due. So, I think you'll continue to see staking and option agreements. There will be some point at which the conversation turns to M&A, and I think the confluence of the developing understanding of the geology in Newfoundland and where the gold market is at globally at the moment, and the price of gold is at specifically, you have a really fortunate, quite rare confluence of circumstance there that's a pretty exciting opportunity.
Absolutely. Aaron, I'll switch over to you here. Both Roger and Mark talked about how this evolved, and Mark there was painting a bunch of, was setting the stage in terms of all these different structures, ideas, tactics for trying to chase down mineralization. Do you want to talk, you're all doing a lot of work this summer, and you are but four of far more companies who are doing a lot of work this summer. So I think a lot of questions are going to be asked and hopefully answered this summer in terms of gold in Newfoundland, and maybe base metals as well, but we might as well focus on gold right now. Do you want to help us think about what are the main questions that investors might want to try and figure out as data starts to come out from all these programs about Newfoundland, about, is it certain structures that you want to pay attention to, geologic theories that you think are really important but don't have answers to? What are you most excited to see out of the data this summer? Because there's going to be lots of it in terms of understanding the opportunity in Newfoundland.
Well, in my conversations with my senior geologist, Bob Weicker, when we discuss assay results in terms of what we have versus what Newfoundland.Gold has, there's always a discussion of, we can't compare ourselves to Newfoundland.Gold because, the numbers are incredible and it's a bonanza find, right? It's absolutely mind-blowing. But with, in terms of the Keats zone, you have 96 grams per ton over 16 meters or something like that, right? And then, let's say that was a once-in-a-lifetime find, right? That'd be a great find. But then they get 25 grams per ton 2 kilometers north of there, and 45 grams per ton 2 kilometers north of there. And then today, Roger Maas shows us that he's got 100 grams per ton north of there, right? And who knows what's going to come up. So what you're looking at is, high arsenic values. You're looking at, in this particular place, you're looking for high stibnite values, vugs in the quartz vein. Are the veins offshooting from the main faults, right? Is our main vein going through there? Are you near faults? Are you near one of these altitude fault zones or the Dog Bay Line fault, right? These are things that people need to watch out for, right? And we have, nothing like Roger's company or Newfoundland.Gold, but in terms of, over 35 meters, we have 0.77 grams per ton. That would be great in any other market, but not in this market. How do we compete with this big monster, right? That, hasn't been found in North America in the last 30 years, right? And that's what we're looking at. That's the kind of thing that's going on in Canada right now.
Fair enough. Yeah, the numbers out of Newfound are unreal, and they have certainly set the bar very high in terms of investor expectations. And like crazy high. But like you say, they do keep kicking out numbers from zones that are not close to each other. And then Labrador just added to that pile today. So I'm very interested to follow this whole region as you guys all do a bunch of drilling this summer. Now, speaking of all of these companies who are working there, and this being a true area play, which is exciting. As a Canadian gold investor, it's exciting to see an area play. We haven't had a real area play to sink our teeth into in a while. Area plays are interesting because there's certainly competitive tension. You want to get your ground, and if you have particular ideas that are a bit proprietary, you might want to hold on to those, keep your cards close to your chest. But at the same time, this is, we've illuminated in the discussion already, this is an evolving geologic theory, this whole area. So collaboration, I'm sure, is also important. And I know you all follow each other's work pretty closely. So Mike, do you want to talk a little bit about that sort of competitive tension versus collaborative effort and how that, you guys are exploits just started drilling today. So you're sort of at the earlier stage relative to Roger and Labrador, for example. How is that for exploits as you get established and move forward? What is it like working in this area play?
It's actually been really great. Starting at the bottom, I guess the prospectors that we're working with have been very forthcoming about the projects that they've vended into our company, but they've also been really helpful in terms of talking about what they see in other pieces of ground that we have. So obviously they have stock, so they want to see the whole thing go, whether or not it's their piece or some other piece. Stepping up, we've had really good relationships with people at Newfound. Gold Spot, we've obviously working with as a consultant to our company. They've been on the ground with Newfound for, I guess, 3 years at this point. So that sort of, there is not specific information on the Newfound projects we're understanding, but the overall understanding of the district as a whole. That's really flowed through. We've talked a little bit with both Roger's guys on the ground and Aaron's team in Gander. So there's a fair bit of sharing of information and helping people move forward as a whole, and I think that's great. It's kind of sad when you get these situations in camps where everyone's just holding everything really tightly, and I think the openness of it, everybody moves forward together and we all rise at the same time. Faster we can, time is always our enemy in this business, so if we can help each other, then we'll all go ahead. And if at the end of the day our project doesn't have what it takes to have a discovery, or someone else's doesn't, then we're not getting hurt by sharing information. So it's not a competitive advantage, I don't think, to do that. I think it's sad when people get all secretive and squirrely. So great to be working in Newfoundland.
Well, I would say that help each other perspective is very Newfoundlander. From my experience visiting that lovely island. Mark, why don't I ask you a bit about working in Newfoundland from a community and government and geologic survey perspective? I mean, you guys have really just showed up in the last few years en masse. I don't know if that's taken the islanders by surprise a little bit, or there's the risk of that having a downside. There's also a lot of opportunity for upside there. So what's it like on the community and government side working in this area play in Newfoundland?
We're still pretty new. Sassy and our subsidiary Gander Gold are still pretty new to the area, but certainly by all accounts, the provincial government has really set the table, right? They've been doing the work for many years when gold prices were low and there wasn't this level of enthusiasm for exploration, and there wasn't the funding available to create the conditions for this kind of an area play to.
So the government knew about all this before you guys did. That's what you're saying.
Well, they have been working on it, right? A lot of those the maps of lake seds and till samples over the years. They've done an excellent job of putting all of that information together and making it available and creating the conditions that I can tell you, having worked from one end of this country to the other, I wish more jurisdictions would do a better job of. And understand that economic development and wealth creation are not accidents. They happen by design. They happen because the structures exist to enable those events. And so I think the government of Newfoundland and Labrador have done a great job of creating those conditions. And the likes of Eric Sprott, who are making sure to inject some funding in this environment into the juniors that are the incubator for the industry, is creating that opportunity. And then, the infrastructure on the island, they have relatively inexpensive, abundant, hydro-generated, low-carbon sourced electricity, roads throughout the island, primary highways and secondary access roads that cover the island. Right, it's not all helicopter access only. There's actually very good infrastructure, lots of water, an experienced workforce who either at home or having commuted for the last several decades to Thompson and Flin Flon and Fort Mac and everywhere else in the country that I've been and lived over the years. The population here knows this industry. They know hard work and they have a lot of experience and enthusiasm for it to bring to bear on these developments. So, between the jurisdiction, the people, the experience, the workforce, it's got everything going for it as a jurisdiction. And at some point there will be a supply crunch, which will sort itself out. Right, the supply will arise to meet the demand, either at home or from away. Right, and I've spoken to multiple diamond drilling and other exploration service companies, for example, that are owned and operated by Newfoundlanders who've been working in Northern Ontario and Northern Manitoba, who are actually packing up and getting ready to go home. And I can tell you that as a New Brunswicker who's lived everywhere but since the age of 16, it's nice to be able to think about working a whole lot closer to home. And so I think that will have a lot of attractiveness for the people who've been able to live there and those who've had to live away for all kinds of good reasons over the years.
Yeah, absolutely. It does sound like a pretty solid setup, match made in heaven type thing for a bunch of the reasons you just painted. Aaron, let me ask you a bit about honing in on targets and then hopefully, hitting into the discoveries that you're looking for. Quite a few of the companies here have pretty big land packages, pretty new land packages, lots of things that look interesting on those land packages. And so now you're starting the work of figuring out where the good hits might be within those big land packages. But you're doing that for better or worse in the context of very high investor expectations, right? Because of the successes that have already taken place. So you want to talk a bit about the process and maybe like the process of targeting. And I know that's a bit of a nebulous question without being so specific to your own projects, but the process of targeting and sort of the approach that companies have to take in that, and maybe in the context of setting investor expectations. Like we can't expect that that the first drill program of every hole is going to return 100 grams gold.
Well, you start off with your geochem or your prospecting is going on, and then you either option it off, and you find investors and stuff like that. But eventually, you get to a drill program that you have soil samples, you have hand samples in the area. You've got enough sampling that you've got an idea of what's underneath the ground, and you have historical information on previous drilling or something like that you can go on. So you create a model of theoretically what's underneath the ground, right? And then you need to pick out your drill targets as to the highest amount of gold that you're going to get, and you need to pick that target as to what your host rock is going to be, what the the highest probability of getting quartz veins in terms of gold exploration. And it's kind of like shooting fish in the ocean. A lot of times you don't know if you're going to hit it, but you make your best guess. Like 75 to 85%. Right. And a lot of times you swing and you miss, and sometimes you hit it out of the park. And we hit a lot of dusters, right?
Yeah.
But we hit a couple of really good ones.
Yeah.
Right. So, but that's the name of the game, right? Like, if they were all going to be good, what's the point in doing it? Because it'd be boring, right? And gold be worth nothing.
That is very true. Yeah.
Yeah. But, basically you need as much information as you can possibly get on a play. And then you can start putting holes in the ground. And the more holes you put in the ground, the better your chances of hitting stuff, because you got the information to target stuff, right?
And from what Mark was saying, the Geologic Survey has a good starting point for that sort of information. And then do you want to just add in, just for some context, what sort of geophysics appears to be helpful so for the investors listening in this district? Because, geophysics to a lot of investors is just colorful blobs and lines on a map. So maybe some reference around that in this area.
Well, we did a magnetic survey, which gave us a lot of information. Resistivity survey might work just as good, but with the graphite in our particular area, it like the magnetics, it defines a graphite area, which is where we don't want to drill, right? So everything else is more of a target, right? But like different magnetic surveys give you different results, right? But I think what they run? Was it a magnetic survey on Newfoundland.Gold? I believe it was.
For structure,
Someone
I think.
Help me out with that?
Mathematics and EM, I think.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
But generally, like everything will give you different information as to quartz veining or graphite anomalies or something like that, right?
For sure. I'm going to get to some questions that are coming in from the audience in just a moment, but first I'm going to ask Mike one more question, which is you pointed to this in your introduction, which was about using AI to help you in the type of process that I just had Aaron describe, which is going from a huge land package with a bunch of things that look interesting based on a list of different data packages. Do you want to describe, this is partly from a question that came in as well, the AI system, like someone asks, are you using the same AI program that Great Bear used? That's not, that you can answer that question absolutely, but do you want to talk about AI a little bit more deeply and what it is, how it works, and how you're hoping that it will help exploits?
Yeah, okay, I'm happy to do that. I guess there are a number of people out there who specialize in the AI interrogation of geological data sets. Really, what we've done is we've compiled all of the various assessment reports and geological data that we have, the mapping that the government has done, the regional soil and tills and lake sediments. Then we add into that the work that we've done in the last year. And on top of that all, we're basically taking the airborne survey that we've flown, which is VTEM, which is an EM survey, and adding in magnetics with it as well. And you look at the relationships between those things and looking to identify the deep-seated structures, also and looking to identify the demagnetized zones, which indicate that you've got a higher hydrothermal fluid flow through the rocks. The warmer water, basically converts magnetite into hematite and other things like that. So you've got destruction of magnetite, and that identifies. So you look for your structure, and then you say, well, has anything gone through it, or is it just a tight fault? Because faults can be conduits for fluids, or they can be barriers to fluids. So you've got to be able to differentiate the two, and then you're looking for intersections of these structures with those things. And you can do that line by line, going through, compiling all that into a GIS system, and looking at the lines of information that you have from your airborne survey, and then looking at all that other information underneath it. But to do that line by line would take us years, whereas AI can do that sort of in a few days. And then we've got highlighted targets, and we have experienced geophysicists and geologists who go through that data set and rank those targets and pick the ones that we think need to be followed up and we don't. There are, as I said, a number of different public companies and private groups. Some people have internal AI strategies. So you can go a lot of different directions with this. I guess for us, going with Goldspot was a bit of a no-brainer because they have already demonstrated their ability to make discoveries in the camp, and they've kind of tuned their artificial intelligence program to the camp. And it's not really, you can't just say, okay, well, I've worked out how this works with Great Bear. Now I'm going to go look at stuff in the Western Pilbara in Australia and get the same results. You've got to, it's garbage in, garbage out with computers. So you've got to have the data set, but you have to have a real thought of what you're looking for in your AI. So it's got to be driven by knowledgeable people. But with huge land package over 2,000 square kilometers of ground, we just couldn't cover it. So this is a very effective way of moving targets forward and being able to hit them with the drill quickly. And time is money, and investors lose patience very quickly. So we've got to be able to drive discovery as quickly as possible. So.
Absolutely. Roger, I haven't been ignoring you in this conversation. I know I only asked you one question at the beginning, but that's partly because a bunch of the questions that have been coming in from the audience are about your drill hit. So I'm going to dive into that for a few moments. Everyone else can just go get a coffee or something. So, I mean, I'll compile some of these questions, but great news today. Does what you intersected today change your drilling plan there? Your drilling plan at the main vein? Does it change how you're approaching that, or is it continue on the path?
We have a drilling strategy in place, but it is one that is evolving. To say that we're just going to drill these holes and drill them regardless of what the results are, I don't think is something that any decent geologist would do. So whenever we get results, we analyze those results and we adapt our drill plan accordingly. And we do that on the fly. As everybody's aware, the turnaround times at the labs are on the order of, I don't know what they are now, 5-6 weeks, I think, for regular samples. But we do use portable XRF in the core shack on every hole, and it's really that allows us to tinker or really just tweak the drill program as to what we're seeing in the portable XRF. And it's basically, as Aaron alluded to earlier, it's arsenic and antimony is what we're looking at. And where we see arsenic and antimony starting to pick up, that's where we know we're onto something. And we've seen antimony minerals in the core. We've seen arsenopyrite in the core. So those are things that we use to tweak our strategy.
Expanding on that, I mean, that obviously makes great sense. Expanding on that question a bit, there's several people who've been asking about, continuing with scout holes along strike versus now trying to go deeper or trying to understand plunge of higher grades based on, I mean, obviously you basically have one key data point now. So yeah, what's your response to that? If someone's asking you, are you going to start doing some deeper drilling to understand plunge of higher grade shoots?
Absolutely. I mean, I think, we've intersected visible gold in 4 drill holes. We've had results back from 2, and we're targeting that ore shoot. That's our key right now. And I think we have to hit it hard until we understand how that thing is plunging, and we don't understand that yet. Mm-hmm. So we have some ideas, but the geology is really complex. Folding, faulting, which is a good thing, because that's why the gold's there. It comes along these structures and it gets trapped by fold noses and things like that. So it's good to have complex structure, but on the other hand, it's a bit of a challenge for the geos, and who I must say are doing an incredible job. They're just doing a great job of teasing out the structure.
And then, of course, you're in that the battle that always presents when you get into a nice high grade hit in a vein type structure, which is how far do you step, right? You want to take big steps to see how big this thing is versus taking small steps that you have a bit more confidence in. And the market, I'm sure, wants you to do both and everything all at the same time.
Of course they do. No, we're really following the strategy that Newfoundland.Gold has been so successful with. Baby steps, basically. Their last hole, which was phenomenal, was I think it was 60 meter step out down plunge, and they hit the best hole that they had. I'd love to do that, but you can only do that when you're confident in where things are going. And as I just said, we're not there yet. We will be stepping out. I mean, we've got the big vein itself at surface is 400 meters. We've drilled about 80 meters along strike with that, and then after that we have another 12 kilometers, the Appleton Fault, which
just
is
12 kilometers.
Showing up in different places. Things are popping up. So yeah, we're going to be stepping out big time. But right now the focus is nailing that high grade.
Gotcha. Okay, I'm going to move on to another few questions specific to companies. Mike, someone was asking, are you drilling? I think the fun answer is that you just started like today. But do you want to talk about your first, second, and third targets in this nascent drill program?
Yeah, we are drilling and very excited to be doing that. That's of course a sea of change in what we're doing. We're drilling at Schooner, which is about 3.5 kilometers to the west of the Keats zone on a parallel structure called the Schooner Fault. We started last Thursday, I think we started turning a drill, so things are progressing there quite nicely. The usual hiccups with getting things going consistently, but we're pretty excited. We've got our office open now in Gander and our core shack there, waiting for, well, actually, I think there might be some boxes in there now. So that's, yeah, it's all very exciting. We are beyond Schooner, which is basically it's structure that's parallel to the Appleton off to the west. Looks very much like the geophysical target that exists at Keats. We're looking at fault splays there and secondary and tertiary structures coming off of the Schooner Fault itself. So looking for areas where we can see gold's coming up through the system, but has enough room in these secondary, tertiary, or splays to be able to bloom and create a significant amount of gold in a deposit. And that's really our target there. I think our next drill program will probably be up at the Quinlan veins in the north. We've got some really nice VG and outcrop there. A number of samples, I think, ranging from 64 to the 20s, 20 grams per ton gold in outcrop, and we're really excited about that. It's a wide zone of quartz veining on a secondary structure coming off of the Appleton, which is really the model that we've got to look for, and we think we can extend that fault on strike or those vein structures quite a distance. We think that's a super opportunity. We also see we think is a tertiary structure and geophysics coming off of that. So this is the structural complexity that you really need to build a lot of ounces, potentially build a lot of ounces. Past that, it's kind of a toss-up between Little Joanna, where we've got our best grade and outcrop, which is I think 194 grams gold, or Jonathan's Pond. Jonathan's Pond, we want to do a little bit more work on to really clean up our targeting there before we start pushing holes into that. But that's that's a really exciting large scale target, and a little bit different. Mark Scott and I with Sassy, we're focused there on the grub line, which is a bit of a different rock type, but again, deep-seated structures. We know there's gold coming out there. We've got 28 grams visible gold in outcrop there. So we know that the system is gold bearing. It's just identifying these structures and getting keying in on the areas of significant deformation where you can form these deposits. So.
All right, that's a good context layout from exploits. Aaron, do you want to, I know you have results that are coming in the next little while, and then you're, kicking off summer work programs as well. Do you want to lay out the scene of where the targets that you have been testing, what your plans are for the summer, just so that those who are interested know what to look for in news from Sky?
Well, we just had a 19-hole drill program over the winter that's just taken a long time for the assays to come back. So we're, over the next couple weeks, potentially we're going to have all those results put out and press released. As far as it goes over the summer, we're looking at maybe August or September for a start date for a new drill program on the Mustang. And we're going to do another soil sampling program, geochemistry and sampling, and potentially drilling on the Virginia property, which is right underneath Rogers' property. So there's some exciting stuff coming up.
Mark, I'm going to give you sort of the same opportunity. Gander, I mean, you're sort of just finishing, I don't even know if you are finished pulling together land, but that's certainly what the focus has been. But now you have a bunch of cash, a bunch of it from Eric, who has been an important funding mechanism for this area play for the gold exploration industry worldwide, but specifically for Newfoundland these days. So you have land and you have cash. What's the summer plan for Gander?
We have engaged Sean Ryan and Kathy Wood and Ground Truth Exploration to basically run our program for the summer that lets us hit the ground running without having to spend a lot of time and money starting up and getting our own infrastructure in place. They have a 30-person crew already working in the area, and in fact started till sampling just this morning, I believe, on our Gander North project, just right next door to Michael's Jonathan's Pond target. So we've started the program there. We think we'll spend sort of in this phase 1 early exploration program this year about $3.5 million. We're going to be flying fixed wing mag survey over all 2,257 square kilometers as soon as possible, starting in a few weeks' time. We're going to do the same with LiDAR. We're collecting all of the aerial photography and such that we need to sort of do the desktop prospecting, and then we will have the Ground Truth crews doing their soil and till sampling program across the priority structures that we've identified on all of our project areas on the island. So that'll be followed up with some probing and exploratory RAB drilling and then diamond drilling for most of the project areas, the exception being the Gander North project, the portion of it in that Jonathan's Pond area where we optioned a block of claims from Vulcan Minerals and have a drill permit in place. We based on the results of this early till sampling that we've started and the follow-up in that, we expect to be doing some exploratory orientation diamond drilling in that area this summer. Maybe as much as 1,500 meters, so not a large program, but that'll get us started drilling on the island. And then, of course, sort of corporately, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention over on the left coast, we're flying a VTEM survey over the 146 square kilometer Formore property at the moment, and we'll be drilling there, following up on the Westmore discovery zone from last summer next month. So lots on the go on either side of the country.
For sure. Okay, now here's my last question, and you're each going to have to answer it, and it's a bit of a tricky one, which is, outside of projects that land targets that your companies own, so Roger can't choose anything that Labrador owns, Michael can't choose anything that Exploits owns, what is your favorite target, exploration target on the island? I mean, this is just a wealth of knowledge of who's got what and who's doing what in Newfoundland. So I'm taking advantage of it to ask each of you, which target outside of your own are you watching for results from this summer with interest? Roger, how about I pick on you first?
Newfoundland.Gold.
Okay.
Are you going to eliminate that as an option?
I feel like I should maybe eliminate Newfound because I mean they're already worth $800 million or whatever.
We probably should. You know what? It's probably an unfair question in some ways because some companies are further along than others, and we don't really know what the ground has yet. So I go for structure. I know that I know that Exploits has done quite a bit of work up around Jonathan's Pond. I was following that quite closely, and I don't think, Mike, you've had anything out from it recently, but I'm going to be very interested to see when you get a drill on it, because that looks really good. It's on the structure. It's you got high grade at surface. So yeah, I think that's one I will be watching.
And fair enough that absolutely there's targets of all stages across Newfoundland right now, some of them very early. I mean, Mark's talking about how they're just starting soil sampling. So obviously Mark's targets are very early, but that's the nature of the game, right? We always have targets across a wide range of stages. So I'm just asking the question based on what's available right now. Mike, what target areas maybe would you wish that Exploits could have gotten when you were establishing your land package, or what are you watching outside of your ground?
Who's the belle of the ball? I guess I would say in a sweeping statement that I actually really like all the projects that my co-presenters have here today. I think these are great. But if I'm looking for an outlier that's not on the screen today, I'd probably pick CanStar down to the south. Okay. They've got grubline targets, and I think we did talk with the vendors on a couple of those pieces of ground early on. And it's very much a grubline target, which we believe in and we think is sort of the sleeper in the camp. And that would be one of the things I think that people should look at.
Cool. Aaron, what are you looking for?
I'm just going to hop outside the Queensway and say the Burin Peninsula. It's a really interesting place, and it's got a lot of potential gold finds in it that I don't think many people have looked at.
And which company?
And I think Pond Resources is a company. They got an operation down there right now, but it's something to look at.
Interesting. Okay, outside ideas. I like it. Mark, what about you?
Well, again, I wouldn't want to dismiss anybody's odds of making a discovery. The prospectivity of this ground, from the Long Range Fault in the west to the Hermitage system and the Grub Line, and even outboard of that to the east, all through central Newfoundland, is a highly prospective, very exciting piece of ground. And all the presenters today and all who've been on here the last 3 days have some really interesting properties. If I had to choose some, I'd choose some of my neighbors, I guess, selfishly. Jonathan's Pond and the Mount Peyton linear that Exploits have, and Eastern Pond that NFG has very close to our Gander South property, and Moosehead across the way from Mount Peyton, and Matador, which were sidled right up to down on the Cape Ray Fault in a different, down towards Portabask in a different part of the province. So there are going to be multiple discoveries here. Some companies are further along, but the 4 million, soon to be 5, I'm sure, million ounce deposit at Marathon, and what NFG is doing and what Matador has, that they're going to turn into a 1 million+ ounce deposit and bring into production. Exploits and Lab are a little further along, and then a whole group of juniors, Sassy and Gander and Sky Gold included, are going to take advantage of this building knowledge about the geology of the island, and I think we're going to see multiple handfuls of really significant economic discoveries over the coming months and the next several years.
Well, that's a positive note to end on. Not that there's been much in the way of negative in this conversation, but that's a nice positive note to end on. One question came in just at the end here, and I'm just going to take a quick stab at answering it. It's a hard one to answer. For the new, what should we as investors be looking for in both the long and short term to gauge the likelihood of high-grade finds from different companies out there? I mean, my answer to that, because I get that sort of question all the time from subscribers, is first of all, understand what the company is trying to do. If they can explain it well, it shouldn't matter whether you're a geologist or not. They need to be able to explain what they're doing, why they're doing it, and why they think it's going to work. And if it does work, what that might mean. So what the results would look like if it works. If you can understand the story and therefore have some understanding of the results when they come out, that means that they have a clear plan, they're executing on that plan, and that is the most important starting point. It's amazing actually how often that's missing in exploration companies, a very clear plan, but that's the starting point. And then as we sort of touched on in this conversation, this is a new area. There's a huge number of targets being tested. So it's also helpful if a company is testing multiple different targets. As Aaron mentioned at one point there, we turn up a lot of dusters in this industry because we're trying to find things that are literally hidden under the ground. And so you do all the best groundwork that you can, and then you drill to see what's actually down there. If a company is drilling more than one promising looking target, that's just more kicks at the can. The odds of success are higher if they have more than one target that they're testing as a first phase approach. So that's my quick answer to that question, because I just don't really have time to turn it over to the guys again. Thank you, Mark, Roger, Aaron, and Michael for joining us today on this panel. And now I'm going to turn it over to a talk that we are all, those of us on the panel, are interested to listen into. which is Richard Goldfarb. So he is a director of C2C Gold. He's also a geologist, very familiar with Newfoundland terrain and how the Newfoundland gold exploration picture is evolving. And he has a talk for us now on precisely that topic. So without further ado, we will move into that. I will mention that this is the last day of the Virtual Investor Day Summit. So if you want to keep up to date with all things Newfoundland, then sign up to receive the newsletter at Newfoundland.Gold. We were chatting before this started that you can get .gold as a website. I don't know why every exploration company in the world doesn't have .gold as a website, but the Newfoundland team figured it out. So go to Newfoundland.Gold. You can sign up for the newsletter and it will help you keep abreast of everything that's happening in this exciting area play. Thank you so much for tuning in and enjoy Richard's talk on geology.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Gwen.
Thanks, Gwen. Thanks, guys.
Well, hello, everybody. It's good to be here, even though it's on virtual. But my name is Rich Goldfarb. I'm a geologist. I'm also on the board of C2C Gold Corporation, one of the companies working in Newfoundland. And I've also been involved with gold in the academic world for many decades. And what I want to do is talk to you today about Newfoundland and why it's so prospective. What in the geology about Newfoundland makes it so exciting for gold exploration today? And so I'll focus on two aspects to this talk. First, just what kind of gold is in Newfoundland and why, what are the geologic features of that gold that make large tonnage deposits. And then we'll look at Newfoundland and see why those features sit in Newfoundland and why Newfoundland is so exciting for gold potential. Gold's been known in Newfoundland for more than 100 years. We can go back into scientific journals such as Nature in the 1880s, where they've talked about some of the gold-bearing veins that were just discovered at that time in the northwest corner of the central part of Newfoundland. Going to more recent times, there are a number of publications by the Geologic Survey of Newfoundland and Labrador talking about gold resources in Newfoundland. So about 15 years ago, gold resources were recognized mainly in two types of deposits, massive sulfides and gold-only deposits. At the time, maybe the estimates were just under 1 million ounces of gold resources in Newfoundland. And what I'm going to focus on today are the gold-only deposits. They're what we term in economic geology orogenic gold deposits. Historically, most of those that you see here are on the Bayer Verte Peninsula, but over the last 15 years, with exciting finds such as in Valentine Lake and on the Dog Bay line, more and more of these orogenic gold deposits have been recognized in the center of New Zealand, in the center of Newfoundland, along many of these major fault systems. And consequently, resources now are at least an order of magnitude larger. Also looking at this old report from the Newfoundland Geologic Survey, even back in 2005, we recognized gold in 3 types of very different mineral deposits in Newfoundland. There are first what are called seafloor VMS deposits. These are base metal deposits that formed at the same time the rocks formed. And besides base metals, they have significant precious metal credits also. And historically, some of these have been mined at relatively moderate scale in Newfoundland. And many of these occur in the same general rocks or terrains that have the orogenic gold deposits. Epithermal gold deposits are deposits related to granites that form at shallow levels. Normally, you don't find these in metamorphic terrains such as Newfoundland, but Hope Brook is the one example in Newfoundland of an epithermal deposit. And in the 1980s and 1990s, more than a million ounces of gold was taken from the Hope Brook deposit here. Basically, Hope Brook floated in from across the ocean and we didn't erode the shallow levels of the crust that have this epithermal deposit. But for the most part, you would not expect these type of deposits to be abundant in Newfoundland. The type of deposits that are abundant in Newfoundland that are down the center of the island, which is called the dunnage zone, going from the Bay of Verte Peninsula all the way to the Dog Bay line, where Newfoundland.Gold has its recent high-grade intercepts, and many other companies are looking, are orogenic type gold deposits. Valentine Lake is an orogenic gold type deposit. The historic mines such as Pine Cove are orogenic gold deposits, etc. So that is really what is the deposit type that is leading to this present day gold rush that we see in Newfoundland, and that has 25, 30 or more companies excited about what they're finding, and I think makes Newfoundland as prospective as it is. So first, what are orogenic gold deposits? Basically, they're just gold deposits in metamorphic rocks. They tend to be in medium grade metamorphic rocks, which often are called green schist facies. Most of these type deposits are steep fault fill veins or coeval extensional type veins, which form at the same time due to changing fluid dynamics. Generally, historically, these would be high grade type gold deposits, 2, 3, 4, 5 grams per ton. Globally, as we can mine lower grade, higher tonnage deposits, many of these that are mined around the world now are less than a gram per ton. Here on the lower right, this is Morro de Oro, the biggest gold deposit in Brazil. It's an orogenic gold deposit, and it's 20 million ounces at 0.4 grams per ton. So we are mining these at very low grades these days. Really, in simple thinking, there's two ways to form gold deposits on our planet. You can bring a granite up to shallow levels and either release fluid from the top of the granite or circulate surface waters. And then you can form porphyry deposits that have copper and gold at the top of the porphyries at maybe 3 kilometers depth, or in the upper 1-2 kilometers, you can form what are called epithermal type deposits, such as Hope Brook. That's one way we form gold deposits, from magmatic or circulating meteoric waters. The second way we form most gold deposits on the planet, and this is the way we form orogenic gold deposits, as you bury rocks in the earth from the surface to depth, sedimentary and volcanic rocks change to metamorphic rocks. When you metamorphose a rock, 3 to 4% of that rock volume will change to fluid. That fluid will move into major faults. During earthquakes, the fluid may move up 500 meters or a kilometer and form your orogenic gold deposits. And these are the deposit types that we see along the faults in the center of Newfoundland that are the deposits that are the all the new discoveries that we're seeing today. When we look globally and ignoring the exceptional historic paleoplaces of South Africa and Witwatersrand, about 50% or about half the world's gold deposits are like Newfoundland, they're orogenic gold. The gold deposits formed during metamorphism, and the other half of the world's gold is mostly magmatic or intrusion-related gold, such as porphyry, epithermal, and gold-bearing skarn deposits. But this is the target type that we're seeing in Newfoundland. The orogenic gold deposits form as you have subduction, terrains are accreted to the margin of continents, and between the terrains as they accrete, or get added to the continents in these sedimentary rocks, we form orogenic gold deposits along the faults. They can form to depths of 20 kilometers. This is different than epithermal and porphyry deposits that form at very shallow levels. So you can see without any amount of erosion, porphyry and epithermal deposits are quickly lost from the geologic record, while orogenic gold deposits, because they form deeper at 5-10 kilometers, are better preserved back through geologic time, hundreds of millions of years, which is the age of many of the Newfoundland deposits. So if we look at gold endowment versus geologic time, We can see most porphyry and epithermal deposits are 50 or 100 million years old, and that's where the gold endowment sits in these intrusion-related deposits. There are a few that go back into the Paleozoic, very few into the Precambrian. But when we look at orogenic gold, it's distributed through geologic time all the way back into the Archean. So when we look at Newfoundland, and we'll talk about this in a few minutes, and gold deposits that formed 400 to 500 million years ago, we're talking about orogenic gold deposits. These form in sedimentary rocks because those are the rocks that are added to the edges of continents and metamorphosed. And there are many world-class provinces of these, such as California Motherlode, Eastern Russia, Victoria, Australia, Otago, New Zealand, the Great Belts of Central Asia, etc. And Newfoundland has a potential to be one of these world-class gold provinces in sedimentary type rocks. They do show a spatial association with seafloor massive sulfide deposits. And I'll explain why that may be important in a little bit. But you should know that seafloor deposits form in the middle of the ocean as the plates move to the edge of the continent, and we start having deformation and metamorphism. These VMS, massive sulfide deposits, such as we have some in Newfoundland, I mentioned, have gold, also get deformed and metamorphosed in these growing continental margins. That's why there's a spatial association of seafloor massive sulfides and orogenic gold deposits. The two types form in different settings at different times, but they spatially overlap. Same with granites. There is a spatial overlap between granites and gold, but there is no genetic association. But granites are important, as I'll get to in a little bit, because they're good receptacles for gold. They're good host rocks. And you see this in places such as Valentine Lake, where Valentine Lake may be 430 million years old, but the 150 million year old intrusion there is a great host rock. And those are host rocks you may want to look for in geophysics in your covered terrain. When we look for orogenic gold deposits in Newfoundland or anywhere in the world, there are three keys for exploration: looking at structure, metamorphism, and tracks. You need large structures to focus a lot of fluid, such as if we look at the Great Abitibi Gold Province of central Canada and Ontario and Quebec. These are your first-order faults, which bound blocks that have collided. The orogenic gold deposits sit along second and third order faults a few kilometers to maybe 10 kilometers adjacent to these major faults. But you need to have large faults to have large deposits. If you don't have large faults, the fluids will go everywhere. You may have a lot of tonnage, but they'll be all low-grade deposits. If you have large faults, the fluids are focused, and you may have your Abitibi or Newfoundland-style gold. Along these faults, and we see this at Wilding Lake and Valentine Lake, we want to look for jogs or bends. This is the great fault in Western Australia that hosts the famous Golden Mile deposit. It strikes 155 to 165 degrees, but you can see the Golden Mile and the other deposits sit where there's a 10, 20 degrees change in strike along that fault. That focuses fluid, and then the fluid can go off into second and third order faults and regional folds and form your gold deposits. So you want to look along these major structures in Newfoundland and everywhere else for changes in strikes along the fault. And you form these fault-filled veins, the extensional veins, which we see in these orogenic gold deposits in Newfoundland and everywhere in the world. And we want to look along contacts. We see this very commonly in all the Newfoundland occurrences. If you have an intrusion and if you have sediments, we want to look along the contact because that's where you'll have your secondary faults and that's where the fluids will flow. And especially where you have structural complexities, complex geometry, you're going to form your ore bodies along the contacts. Here's another example from some work by workers in West Africa. Here you can see phyllite on one side, you can see volcanic rocks on the other, and the shear that develops between these lithologies is where a lot of the mineralization is going to be concentrated. And you have that in Newfoundland again. It's no exception. Where these major faults intersect regional fold systems, anticlines, fluids can move up the limbs of the anticline, form gold along the limbs of the anticline, or on top of the anticlines where you have major faults develop along the axis of these fold systems. Maguma in Nova Scotia is very famous for these, although small scale. Victoria in Australia is very famous for these at large scale. And I think Newfoundland, between many of the faults, we see many of these same type of anticlinal fold systems, making it very prospective for orogenic gold. Besides structure, the next thing that's important is metamorphism. Orogenic gold deposits sit in medium-grade metamorphic rocks, mostly green schist facies, and most of the gold occurrences in Newfoundland sit in green schist facies. Why? Because as you metamorphose a rock between green schist and amphibolite facies, again, that's what 3 to 4% of the rock volume changes to fluid, and that fluid carries sulfur and gold and forms your orogenic gold deposits. Orogenic gold is basically a regional metamorphic fluid. It's a product of metamorphism. If you metamorphose the rock, you're always going to create a gold-bearing fluid that's going to form gold. And we can look anywhere in the world. We can look at Western Australia. We can look at the Abitibi. And you notice how most of the gold endowment sits in these medium-grade metamorphic rocks. Those are what you tend to target. So you want to look at structure. You want to look at metamorphism. And then we want to look at competency contrasts, which would be our physical traps. If you have a competent rock, like say a granite, sitting in a less competent rock, such as a shale or an argillite, the granite fractures more easily open space along these major structures, and that's where your fluid's going to flow. For example, this is the Alaska Juneau mine where I worked for many years. This is a large intrusive body. You can see the mine or at it here for scale, and you can see how 95% of the mineralization in these quartz veins sits in this intrusive body and not in the more ductile sediments adjacent to it. That doesn't mean there's a genetic association. This intrusion is 150 million years older than the gold, but it's something to explore for because it's competent and it soaks up that gold-bearing fluid because it fractures more easily. That's what we mean by physical traps. There are also chemical traps. The great 40 million ounce Homestake deposit in South Dakota is an example of that. You can see these different rock formations, but you can see how all the 40 million ounces of gold sit in this one thin formation called Homestake. Why? Fluids move up structures. When they hit this Homestake formation, it's a banded iron formation, lots of iron. The sulfur that carries the gold in the fluids reacts with the iron. You form pyrite and arsenopyrite, and the gold that's moving with the sulfur drops out of solution. That's what we call a chemical trap. And many of the gold occurrences in Newfoundland are associated with iron-rich rocks like iron-rich gabbros that are good chemical traps. So you have good physical and chemical traps for orogenic gold, and Newfoundland has both of these types of traps. We see differences in deformation styles. We can see very ductile, cracked seal type veins. We can see very brittle breccia or stockwork type veins. We see all these in most orogenic gold provinces, and Newfoundland is no different than the rest. Often people refer to shallow epizonal type orogenic gold deposits in Newfoundland, comparing it to Fosterville, Australia, but some of the mineralization isn't as brittle as Fosterville, and some would be mesozonal and slightly deeper, some of the Newfoundland mineralization. When you get very deep, rocks are very ductile. You're going to have lots of replacement style mineralization, and you see some of this in Newfoundland, but you're not going to have big quartz veins when the rocks are not brittle. When you get very shallow, the orogenic gold deposits only form from 3 to 20 kilometers. In the upper few kilometers, where there's no granites, the geothermal gradient's low, so you don't carry gold to shallow levels, but at 200 degrees, you may deposit massive stibnite. You get very shallow, you get cinnabar. Some of these stibnite occurrences that we see in Newfoundland could be the tops to orogenic gold deposits. Donlin Creek in Alaska, which is a large gold tonnage deposit, is a good example of that. And could some of these in Newfoundland be Donlin Creek type occurrences? So now, well, before I get to Newfoundland, one last slide. Tectonically, what we see in Newfoundland is so similar to so many of these productive orogenic gold provinces worldwide. Just for example, take Eastern Russia. Here we have the continent. Here we have a series of arcs that collided. Here we have a back arc area with marine sediments, with a whole series of fault systems and orogenic gold deposits sitting along all of these. Some of these are alluvial, some of these are lode, but together there's more than 100 million ounces of gold in here. This is the same kind of tectonic setting we see in the Cordillera of Western North America, and it's what we saw in Newfoundland 500 to 400 million years ago. So now let's look at Newfoundland quickly and look at the gold and see how it fits the orogenic model. The Newfoundland grew basically from terrains that collided with the continent of North America between about 500 and 400 million years ago. And the orogenic gold is concentrated in this what's called dunnage zone. There's a whole series of rocks here called the Notre Dame subterrane or zone, which are include a bunch of rocks that moved along the margin from the north and sort of came along this fault line here and were accreted beginning 480 million years. Then we have a couple of more outboard terrains that actually came along these faults and collided, and they came from Gondwana on the other side of the planet. And they all collided here between 500 and 400 million years ago. And it's during these last collisions at about 400 million years when most of the gold formed along these faults at about 430 to 400 million years. So this is the area where the gold formed. And we also formed during this collision lots of other secondary faults, such as the Victoria Lake Shear Zone, that has the Valentine Lake deposit and Wilding Lake prospect. Just 1 or 2 quick slides to show you what happened. These are the terrains that make up the eastern part of Newfoundland. They moved from Gondwana here on the other side of the planet over 150, 200 million years and collided with North America and collided with North America to eventually form Newfoundland. The whole Brook epithermal deposit in Newfoundland that I talked about earlier actually was part of these terrains and migrated with these terrains across the ocean. It formed before Newfoundland formed. Eventually, these terrains became part of North America, and here in Newfoundland and down to Nova Scotia, and then all the way through the eastern U.S., we formed orogenic gold deposits, and later collisions formed these same deposits in Northwest Europe, in the French Massif and the Bohemian Massif of the Czech Republic. So it was this growth of Pangea and terrains, oceanic terrains, being metamorphosed in here that formed a whole series of great orogenic gold deposits. Just briefly, many of these deposits in the United States were mined prior to the Civil War. But once the Civil War started, as well as gold being discovered out in California and then in Alaska and Yukon, all the great prospectors left. And the gold deposits here all seem to be small. They don't have great major structures. Same when we look at Maguma here in Nova Scotia. There's a lot of high-grade, really nice-looking gold deposits, but they don't have the fault systems that you have up here in Newfoundland. And along all these fault systems in Newfoundland, we're starting to recognize potential for significant gold. And actually, this terrain, the Notre Dame zone here in this part of Newfoundland, can be traced up to the British Isles. And similar deposits have been recently put into development in Northern Ireland and southern Scotland. But here's what we have when we look at this map from Sandman in 2017 in Newfoundland. This whole central belt is characterized. Here's the more historic orogenic gold deposits of the Bay of Verte Peninsula. Here's some of the large fault systems and secondary fault systems in the middle of the dunnage zone, including the Valentine Lake Shear Zone. And we can look at these fault systems all the way over to the Dog Bay line. This is the same scenario we see in the Cordillera of North America, Western North America, that we see in the Russian Far East, and that we see in Victoria, Australia. And the potential is huge. I think understanding prospectivity between the different fault systems is going to be important. It's taken a long time to recognize this because glacial cover is quite extensive here in central Newfoundland. But certainly what we're seeing now makes the dunnage zone world-class perspective. As I mentioned, historically, the Bay of Verde Peninsula has been the area where most of the work has gone on in the 1980s and 1990s. Anaconda up here at Pine Cove and some of the adjacent properties has been mining about 15,000 ounces of gold over the last 10, 12 years, both replacement style and fault type mineralization. A lot of mineralization is along contacts between different units, what you would expect for orogenic type gold. And there's a couple of fault systems here that are very permissive. So far, most of these are high grade but low tonnage. But at the price of gold today, a few high grade deposits next to each other are good things. The exploit subzone in the central and moving over to the eastern side of the dunnage zone here is really the area that's attracted a lot of attention. I've been involved with C2C recently, but certainly many other companies along here have had great success already, such as Marathon's Valentine Lake with more than 4 million ounces, etc. These all reflect closures of these ocean rocks as terrains were accreted. These represent rocks that were collided and closed, and we had reverse faults and shearing up till about 400 million years, 430 million years. And then there was also some strike slip motion on these, and that's perhaps when some of the gold came in. We're looking at major fluid conduits, structural complexity, regional fold systems, and that's where we're going to find good orogenic type gold deposits. We can look at Marathon's Valentine Lake. We can see interesting jogs along here. Again, that's where you're going to focus fluid. We have different lithologies here. We have lithological contacts, and that's where the gold is. That is critical. And I mentioned earlier VMS deposits, seafloor massive sulfide deposits. When we metamorphose a package of rocks, and there's a lot of seafloor sulfide in there, there's going to be a lot of syn sedimentary pyrite with high background gold. So it's a bonus when you metamorphose rocks that have VMS deposits. That's why maybe the Abitibi is so rich. That's why maybe we're finding Egypt, Eritrea, Sudan, that region of East Africa now is becoming recognized as a very gold-rich area. It is a bonus to have earlier massive sulfide deposits as part of the package being metamorphosed. We can look at these slides from Marathon Gold. Again, the host rock is a competent granite. It's not a genetic association, but looking for these different lithologies that are good traps are critical for finding these quartz tourmaline pyrite veins, such as we see at Marathon. Some people, the tellurides at Valentine Lake, people like to say, oh, tellurides, it must be related to intrusion. That's not necessarily true. Many of the world's great orogenic gold deposits have significant tellurides. In fact, tellurides are recovered from the ore at the Kensington deposit in Alaska that has most of the gold tied up in tellurides. The Golden Mile in Western Australia has significant gold-bearing tellurides. So it's not necessarily related to granite. So when we look here, you can see the main shear zone on one of the Valentine Lake properties, and you can see how the mineralization sits in the hanging wall intrusion. It's a very favorable, competent rock. Another thing that I find very exciting, this is from some of C2C's work that Sean Ryan, who you heard one of the previous days talk about, glacial till. This area is undercover, but the till anomalies throughout this part of Newfoundland and over to the east along the Dog Bay line are very extensive, and they suggest on the fold systems between these two regional fault systems, the Red Indian line and the Victoria Lake shear zone, significant gold potential along the complex structural geology here, which is, if we look at, you can see from this slide from Sandman in 2014, the Joslyn zone occurrence, we're looking at anticlinal structures. The Joslyn zone actually sits in these turbidites below sort of a black shale seal type rock right above it. But what's exciting is all these till anomalies sit where you have these regional fold systems. And so not just right adjacent to the faults, but these fold systems associated with the faults are certainly exciting targets here in this part of central Newfoundland. A lot of the rocks are bleached and they're spotted, which are distal guides to looking for orogenic gold deposits. A lot of these show early albite alteration. Steve Piercy and some of his students working in Newfoundland from Memorial University talk about that. You albitize a rock, you make it more brittle, it fractures more easily. Widespread albite alteration that we see in here is critical. So there are so many exciting features here that you would expect to find in a large gold camp. And now we can move far to the east, and this is where the exciting Newfound.Gold Queensway project sits, and many other companies are working now along the Dog Bay line and Grub line, sort of suture zone. And secondary faults along here have significant golden till anomalies. A lot of results are very exciting. And we may have 3 or 4 zones here that have the potential to have serious world-class gold systems. And this would look then very similar to what we see in Victoria, Australia. One thing that sticks out to me about this area of Newfound gold, it's on the margin of this large batholith, which is slightly older than the gold occurrences that are being found in the drilling. The margins to batholiths give you sort of a structural regime where you have different stresses and very favorable areas to find orogenic gold. You can see this in orogenic gold all the way back to Barberton in southern Africa at 3.2 billion years ago. The margins of these large batholiths in the adjacent sediments, very good for explorationists. So to summarize, why I'm excited about Newfoundland, why the company I'm involved with is excited about Newfoundland, C2C Gold, and why many of you and many of the companies that are there now. It seems to have all the right ingredients. It has favorable source rocks. You've metamorphosed oceanic sediments, and oceanic sediments that have pre-metamorphic VMS deposits to add even more gold and sulfur into the mix. It has an exceptional conduit system of major terrain boundary sutures, second and third order shears off these, and a great regional fold system. And it has the complexity and lithology to have favorable traps. And a few things about orogenic gold that stick out. First off, if we look at these worldwide, so far, one giant deposit's been found here, and that is the Valentine Lake area properties. But there's never just one orogenic gold deposit in a province, whether you talk about Victoria, California Motherlode, Central Asia from Muruntau all the way to Kumtar. You're going to find lots and lots of these. They occur together in provinces. So we would expect many million-ounce deposits in an area like this. Second, we're looking undercover. So we're just beginning to explore and find these kind of deposits in a greenfields area, which is Newfoundland. Historically, prospectors would find the largest deposit first, and that would be then other favorable deposits would be smaller but the same type. However, we're looking undercover. There's a large glacial till covering here. So the largest first rule may not apply here. It may not be Valentine Lake. Using new tools of geochemistry and especially geophysics and creative thinking in our drilling, we might find many other deposits, and some could be bigger than Valentine Lake. I can look at, say, Kinross's Taziast in Mauritania. That's the first one found, again, undercover, but it may not be the largest. So as we move our exploration undercover, the rule of largest first may not hold. And could this be the 100 million ounce province that we have in this Paleozoic gold belt that really stretches from Alabama to southern Scotland? It certainly geologically has the best ingredients to form what would be a Victoria, Australia style or Eastern Russia style orogenic type gold province that has been hidden under glacial cover for a long time and is now being recognized. And that's why I'm so excited about Newfoundland. So anyway, thanks for listening. And certainly I'm glad always to accept questions over email or anything else. So thanks a lot, everybody. Bye-bye.